Hi, I'm Stephen Podesnak, and today on 90 Minutes we'll be talking about bioconservation and the fascinating world of changing crops to be more efficient and better for the environment. First up for discussion, Pam Ronald, scientist studying genetic modification.
Pam Ronald is a scientist from the University of California, Davis. She's a supporter of eco-friendliness, and she believes that we can create a system that greatly cuts pesticide use, insulates crops against floods and droughts, and helps poor farmers in the developing world by combining GMO crops with eco-friendly practices. They have created a new species of rice that is able to live underwater for up to 2 weeks. They initially came up with this idea for the rice farmers in Asia that are often devastated by floods, wiping out their entire farm. So, what they did is they sifted through the 140,000 rice species until they came upon a species that was able to withstand long periods of time underwater. Then, they went through the painstaking process of inspecting the species genome until they found a particular gene that they called the master switch for flood tolerance. They then had two options. They could either slice the gene out of the flood-resistant crop and insert it into the commercial crop, genetically modifying it, or breed the two rice crops, targeting the master switch, a process known as marker-assisted breeding. They decided to use the marker-assisted breeding process, and because this is not technically a genetically modified organism, they have not suffered nearly as much scrutiny from the government agencies. This new species is not only flood-resistant, but also very easy to plant.
Hi, I'm Stephen Podesnak, and today I'm here with Pam Ronald. Now, Pam, tell us, what do you do?
I am a scientist in the conservation biotechnology industry, and what I do is me and my team, we create new plant species used for consumption and other uses.
Now, I understand you made a new strain of rice. Could you tell us something about that?
Yes, we've created a new strain of rice that is fully submersible in floodwaters for 2 weeks and is also very easy to grow. And we've created this strain of rice for Asian farmers in the countries of Asia, and floods in the region really affect them. They can wipe out their entire rice crops.
Yeah.
So the way that we created this rice is what we did is we looked through a bunch of species of rice and found one specific species that we found was that could be submerged underwater for very long periods of time. And we took that grain of rice and we bred it with the rice being used by farmers now. And we targeted the gene that has the quote-unquote master switch for flood prevention, and we targeted that gene, and that is known as marker-assisted breeding. And now our new grain of rice is in many countries in Asia, and we expect it to expand further from here.
Next up on 90 Minutes, we have Nancy Millis, a representative from the Australian government, telling us about their experience. Nancy Millis is a scientist from the Australian government who was in charge of assessing GMOs for use in Australia. She and her team broke down the major pros and cons of GMOs for the public to view. The main pros to GMO crops is that they can naturally defend themselves from caterpillars and other types of insects, meaning less chemicals have to be sprayed on them. This significantly helps the environment and the soil and the water around them. They can also be changed to produce better vitamins and therefore be healthier foods. And more efficient crops means there's not as much salt in the ground, and they can survive in really bad climates. Major cons to GMO use is that a GMO organism could pollinate a non-GMO organism. This is dangerous because it could create a toxin that would be harmful to humans, or it could just have poor nutritional value, or could not even be digested by the human body.
Hi, I'm Ryan Mannion, and this is Nancy Mill. Hello, Nancy. What exactly is it that you do?
I'm a scientist for the Australian government, and most importantly, I was in charge of evaluating GMOs and their usage in Australia.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people are questioning the use of GMOs in this modern day. How do you feel about them?
I like to try and stay unbiased as I am in a governmental position. There's a lot of good things and bad things that go with it. A lot of good things are they do increase crops, they do save water, and they really can help the environment. One of the bigger issues is what we don't know what they'll do. There's a lot of unknowns in the field, and that's something we're really looking into.
Okay, thank you. Looking into the future, where do you see your profession going in this field?
Well, it's hard to tell right now. We have had a lot of success with crops. Like I said, they were more efficient, and they definitely do work better when they're genetically modified. And we have seen a few instances where what they do is they end up mixing with other species, and this can have unexpected side effects. Sometimes hurts the other species, sometimes it just wipes out that species, and it can have some serious issues, and that's the main reason why not everyone uses GMOs.
Thank you. Now, what are some of the pros and cons of the GMOs?
Well, the main pros is that GMOs are definitely more efficient. They save water, they save land, and a lot of the times they're used just because it's such a harsh environment. In Australia, we have a lot of major droughts, and if a plant dies in that, it can be very devastating to our economy. And a lot of it's just for our own food consumption. And then the negatives. Negatives would be it mixing with other, like the indigenous species, and hurting the environment in ways we can't predict. That's the biggest issue. It's us trying to predict what it's going to do, and if we don't know, we can't use it. So that's the scary part.
Okay.
Next on 90 Minutes, we talk with Joseph Levinsky, an employee at a DNA bank in Antarctica, as he tells us about the interesting processes and developments in the field of DNA banks. Svalbard is a DNA bank in Antarctica. DNA banks are storage facilities designed to hold genetic material, most commonly seeds, for long periods of time in order to ensure biodiversity and life in specific organisms. Today, most DNA banks are used to create genetically modified crops. This process begins with researchers identifying markers for specific traits in the crops. Such traits would be resilience to high levels of salt, wind, or even low water content. Once the markers for the traits are identified, they go through each species and write down the markers found in it. This is called DNA profiling. With this information, they can choose which genetic modification they want to make by picking out genes and putting them into different crops. If done correctly, the new strain could be more resilient to harsh environments, use less water, and create more food.
Hi, I'm Ryan Manion, and I'm here with Joseph Levinsky. So, Joseph, what exactly is it that you do?
I'm a scientist, and I work at the DNA Bank in Antarctica. It's the largest in the world. I basically preserve the samples, catalog them, that sort of thing.
So what exactly is a DNA bank?
A DNA bank, in most situations, is a large collection of seeds, and there's some other specimens that go along with it, but generally we stick to seeds, and we catalog them, and the main point is for preservation.
And how does this all relate to conservation biotechnology?
The main point of DNA banks is for conservation. The idea is to make sure that plant species never go extinct. If there's a huge disease that wipes out a large amount of crops, you'll always have backups. And they've already been used before in situations in Africa where large plant loss has been found. Luckily, we had seeds that backed them up. And there's been other situations similar to that. But we're looking long term, especially with the climate change that's been occurring. We really need to protect ourselves against large-scale diseases that could take out our food.
So Joseph, what exactly do you use these DNA banks for?
Well, currently, since not everyone needs seeds, we haven't had the big devastation in crops or any major ones. We haven't done a lot of that, but a big part of what we have been doing is studying the DNA of the different seeds. A lot of people who make GMOs, different companies that do those modifications, they end up using our information, and we sometimes develop our own depending on the companies we work with.
Today on 90 Minutes, we talked about conservation biotechnology. We discussed GMOs and their use in countries such as Australia for producing more foods, specific breeding that has helped Asian farmers against flooding, and long-term future preservation in DNA banks in Antarctica. from all the people in 90 Minutes Productions, thank you for your time, and have a nice night.